No one at the ultra-exclusive Beaumont Hotel noticed the quiet, curvy waitress meticulously clearing their plates. To the wealthy Chicago elite, she was just an invisible part of the furniture. But when a group of ruthless, privileged socialites pushed her too far, mocking her weight, destroying her dignity, and humiliating her in front of a packed dining room, they made a fatal miscalculation. They thought they were breaking a pathetic nobody. They had absolutely no idea that the woman sweeping up their shattered glass was secretly the wife of the undisputed king of the city's criminal underworld. The Oak Room at the Beaumont Hotel, nestled right off Chicago's Magnificent Mile, was the kind of establishment where a single dinner cost more than most people's monthly rent. The chandeliers were authentic. 1920s crystal, the napkins were imported, Belgian linen, and the clientele was a revolving door of the city's most arrogant, untouchable one-percenters. Politicians, tech billionaires, and old money heirs treated the dining room as their personal playground. For 24-year-old Clara Higgins, the Oak Room was simply a place to hide in plain sight. Clara wasn't built like the other waitresses. The hospitality industry in this part of the city favored a very specific aesthetic, tall, skeletal, and eager to please. Clara, on the other hand, was short and undeniably curvy, with soft, generous hips, a full chest, and a round face framed by unruly chestnut curls. She had sweet, expressive brown eyes and a naturally shy demeanor that made her a prime target for the casual cruelty of the wealthy. Her tailored black uniform, custom-ordered by a perpetually irritated manager, clung to her curves in a way that made her deeply self-conscious. She spent her shifts tugging at the hem of her skirt, keeping her eyes glued to the polished mahogany floors, and doing everything in her power to remain completely invisible. It was a Tuesday evening when the nightmare truly began to take shape. Table 4. A prime booth overlooking the glittering city skyline had been reserved for Jessica Kensington. Jessica was 23, blonde, dangerously thin, and the heir to a sprawling commercial real estate empire. She moved through life with the cold, calculated cruelty of someone who had never been told no. Her regular entourage consisted of 2 equally terrifying women, Chloe Vanderpool, a pharmaceutical heiress with a razor-sharp tongue, and Brittany Haynes, a minor social media influencer who documented every waking second of her manufactured life. From the moment Clara approached their table to pour the sparkling water, the temperature in the booth seemed to drop. "Oh, wow," Jessica murmured, not bothering to lower her voice as Clara leaned over to fill her glass. Jessica's icy blue eyes scanned Clara from head to toe, pausing at her waistline. "I didn't realize the Beaumont lowered its hiring standards. Are we doing a charity program for the socially awkward and physically expanded?" Chloe snorted, swirling her expensive gin and tonic. Maybe she ate the previous waitress, Jess. Honestly, I'm losing my appetite just looking at her uniform. It's holding on for dear life. One deep breath, and those buttons are going to take someone's eye out. Clara's cheeks burned hot with instant, agonizing shame. Her hand trembled slightly, causing the heavy glass pitcher to clink against the rim of Jessica's crystal goblet. "Watch it, Shrek," Brittany snapped, holding her phone up to record. "If you spill that on my Prada boots, your entire year's salary won't cover the cleaning bill." "I apologize," Clara whispered, her voice barely audible over the low hum of the dining room. She stepped back, clutching the pitcher tightly to her chest. "I'll give you a few moments to look over the menu." She practically fled to the safety of the swinging kitchen doors. Pushing through, she leaned against the cool stainless steel of the prep counters, squeezing her eyes shut. She forced herself to take deep, measured breaths. "It doesn't matter," she told herself. "They don't know you. They don't know anything." Her trembling fingers reached up to the collar of her uniform, slipping beneath the starchy fabric. Resting flat against her collarbone, hidden entirely from the world, was a heavy platinum chain. Hanging from the chain was a massive, flawless, 5-carat, radiant-cut, diamond wedding ring. Clara traced the cold edges of the stone, letting it ground her. Nobody at the Beaumont Hotel knew the truth. They thought Clara was just a struggling girl from the South Side, working double shifts to make ends meet. They didn't know that she lived in a multi-million-dollar penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. They didn't know that the reason she insisted on working this grueling, demeaning job was to maintain a sense of normalcy, a desperate attempt to hold on to her independence in a world that terrified her. And they certainly didn't know who had put that ring on her finger. His name was Dominic Costello. To the FBI, he was the ghost running the Chicago syndicate, a ruthless, calculating kingpin who controlled the ports, the underground casinos, and half the unions in the Midwest. To the city's elite, he was a shadowy nightmare, a man you didn't speak of unless you wanted to disappear. But to Clara, he was just Dom, her fiercely protective, terrifyingly devoted husband. Dominic had begged her to quit the Oak Room 100 times. He wanted to drape her in designer clothes, buy her an island, and burn down any building that caused her an ounce of stress. But Clara had pleaded with him. She needed this. She needed to prove she wasn't just a fragile doll kept in a bulletproof glass case. She wanted to work. She wanted to be normal. With a heavy sigh, Clara let the ring fall back against her skin, safely hidden. She adjusted her apron, pasted a polite smile on her face, and walked back out into the dining room. She could survive Jessica Kensington. It was just words, just cruel, empty words from a bored girl. Or so she thought. The harassment didn't stop that Tuesday. It escalated into a brutal, calculated sport. Over the next 3 weeks, Jessica, Chloe, and Brittany made it a point to request table 4 every time they dined at the Beaumont, and they specifically demanded that Clara be their server. The Oak Room's manager, Mr. Caldwell, a sniveling, opportunistic man who bowed to wealth like it was a deity, was only too happy to oblige. He completely ignored Clara's hesitant requests to be reassigned, telling her she needed to develop a thicker skin if she wanted to survive in fine dining. The psychological torture became a routine. When Clara brought them bread, Chloe would loudly announce that Clara shouldn't be tempted by the carbs, suggesting she needed a salad instead. When Clara recited the evening specials, Jessica would interrupt her, asking if Clara had taste-tested the entire kitchen before clocking in. Brittany would secretly film Clara walking away, posting the videos to her private stories with captions like #WhaleWatch and when the restaurant hires a blimp. Clara absorbed it all in silence. She swallowed her tears, smiled politely, and provided impeccable service. She didn't tell Dominic. If Dominic found out, he wouldn't just get them banned from the restaurant. He would ruin their families, dismantle their businesses, and perhaps do something much, much worse. Clara's sweet, gentle nature couldn't bear the thought of violence, even if it was in her defense. She thought she was strong enough to endure it. But Friday night broke her. The Oak Room was at full capacity, buzzing with the elite weekend crowd. Table 4 was holding court, drinking heavily and laughing hysterically at a joke Jessica had just made. Clara approached the table, balancing a large silver tray loaded with their main courses and a fresh bottle of vintage Merlot that cost $1,000. As she carefully set the heavy tray onto the serving jack, Jessica's eyes locked onto Clara with a sudden, vicious gleam. "You know, Clara," Jessica said loudly, her voice cutting through the ambient noise of the restaurant. Several nearby tables paused their conversations to look over. "My father is heavily involved in the agricultural sector. We own a massive pig farm out in Iowa. We're actually looking for a new prize sow to breed. Looking at you, I think you'd be a fantastic candidate. You've certainly got the bulk for it." A sharp, cruel burst of laughter erupted from Chloe and Brittany. The surrounding tables went dead silent. A few patrons looked uncomfortable, but no one, absolutely no one, intervened. Clara froze. The blood drained from her face, leaving her pale and trembling. A hot, prickly sensation of profound humiliation washed over her entire body. Her throat tightened so fast she felt like she was choking. She stood there completely paralyzed under the spotlight of Jessica's malice, the entire restaurant watching her. "What's wrong, Piggy?" Chloe taunted, leaning forward. "Did the big word confuse you?" I... Clara stuttered, her vision blurring with unshed tears. She reached for the bottle of Merlot on her tray, desperate to pour the wine, finish the service, and run away. Her hands were shaking violently. As Clara lifted the bottle, Jessica smirked and subtly kicked her stiletto heel directly into the leg of the serving jack. The jack wobbled violently. Clara gasped, lunging to stabilize the heavy silver tray, but it was too late. The tray tipped. Plates of filet mignon and sea bass crashed onto the pristine floor, shattering into pieces. But worse, far worse, the open bottle of Merlot slipped from Clara's panicked grip. The dark red wine splashed down, missing the table completely, and pouring directly down the front of Clara's white uniform blouse and black apron. The crash echoed through the silent dining room. Clara stood there dripping in expensive red wine, surrounded by broken china and ruined food. She looked like she had been slaughtered. "Oh my God!" Jessica shrieked in fake horror, jumping up from her seat. "Look what you did, you clumsy fat idiot. You almost ruined my dress, Mr. Caldwell." The manager materialized out of thin air, his face pale with panic. "Miss Kensington, I am so deeply sorry. Are you harmed?" She completely lost control. Brittany lied loudly, her phone already out, and recording Clara's humiliation. "She's too big to be maneuvering around these tables." "It's a hazard." Mr. Caldwell turned to Clara, his eyes blazing with fury. "Clara, look at this mess. You are a disgrace to the Beaumont clean. This up immediately, and then get out of my sight. You are suspended without pay until further notice." Clara didn't defend herself. She couldn't. The tears finally spilled over hot and humiliating, tracking through the makeup she had carefully applied that morning. Without a word, she dropped to her hands and knees in her wine-soaked uniform, right in the middle of the dining room. She began picking up the sharp pieces of broken porcelain with her bare hands, ignoring the stinging cuts as the jagged edges sliced into her fingers. Above her, Jessica leaned over her voice, a poisonous whisper meant only for Clara. "Know your place, trash. You're nothing. You'll always be an ugly, fat, worthless nobody." Clara kept her head down, her bloody fingers clutching the broken plates. She cleaned the mess, stood up, and walked toward the kitchen. She stripped off her apron, grabbed her small, worn purse from the locker room, and walked out the back service door into the freezing Chicago night, completely broken. The alley behind the Beaumont Hotel was dark, damp, and reeked of rotting produce and stale rain. Clara stepped out into the freezing November wind, shivering violently as the chilled air hit her wine-soaked blouse. She wrapped her arms around herself, sobbing quietly into the silence of the alley. The cruel words echoed endlessly in her mind. "Prize sow, clumsy fat idiot, worthless nobody." She leaned against the rough brick wall, sliding down until she was sitting on the cold, wet pavement. She buried her face in her hands, letting the agony wash over her. She had tried so hard to belong to the normal world, to be a regular girl working a regular job, but they had crushed her. They had looked at her soft heart and her soft body and decided to destroy it for entertainment. Suddenly a pair of headlights cut through the darkness of the alley. A massive armored black Lincoln Navigator pulled up slowly, its tires crunching softly against the gravel. The engine purred with a deep, menacing hum. The headlights shut off, plunging the alley back into shadows, but Clara didn't move. She knew that engine. She knew that car. The heavy bulletproof door swung open. A man stepped out. Dominic Costello was 32 years old, standing 6'3" with a build carved from violence and discipline. He wore a bespoke charcoal grey Tom Ford suit that cost more than most cars, perfectly tailored to his broad shoulders. His dark hair was meticulously styled, and his sharp, striking Italian features were usually set in an expression of terrifying indifference. He was a man who commanded empires with a whisper, a man whose very presence sucked the air out of a room. But when his dark obsidian eyes locked onto Clara sitting on the wet pavement, the coldness vanished, replaced instantly by a raw, terrifying panic. "Clara." His voice was a deep, gravelly command that brooked no hesitation. In 2 massive strides, Dominic crossed the alley, dropping to his knees on the filthy ground right in his $1,000 suit. He didn't care about the dirt. He didn't care about anything but her. "Amore mio, what happened?" he demanded, his large, calloused hands gently framing her tear-stained, round face. His thumbs brushed away the tears, his touch shockingly soft for a man who tore his enemies apart with his bare hands. Clara leaned into his palm, a fresh wave of sobs racking her chest. "Dom, please, take me home. Just take me home." Dominic's eyes swept over her shivering form. He saw the dark, spreading stain of the red wine soaking her blouse. He saw her ruined hair, her trembling lips, and then his eyes dropped to her hands. He saw the blood. Dominic's jaw clenched so hard, a muscle ticked violently in his cheek. He gently took her small cut hands in his massive ones, examining the slices on her fingers where the broken china had cut her. The air around him seemed to freeze, growing thick with a dark, suffocating malevolence. "Who did this?" Dominic whispered. The tone wasn't loud, but it was deadly. It was the voice of the Chicago Don. It was the voice that ordered executions. "No one." Clara lied weakly, trying to pull her hands away. I dropped a tray. I'm clumsy. I made a mess and Mr. Caldwell fired me. It's my fault." Dominic didn't believe her for a fraction of a second. He knew his wife. He knew her grace, her meticulous care. He also recognized the smell of $1,000 vintage Merlot, and he knew damn well that the cuts on her hands were from picking up shattered glass while someone watched. He saw the profound, soul-crushing humiliation in her beautiful brown eyes. This wasn't an accident. She had been targeted. She had been degraded. Wordlessly, Dominic stood up. He shrugged off his heavy cashmere overcoat and gently wrapped it around Clara's shivering shoulders, cocooning her in his warmth and the scent of expensive cologne and gunmetal. He scooped her up effortlessly into his arms, holding her tightly against his chest as if she weighed absolutely nothing. Clara buried her face into his neck, letting out a small, broken whimper. "I'm sorry, Dom. I'm so sorry. Do not apologize." Dominic growled softly, kissing the top of her head as he carried her to the SUV. "You have nothing to apologize for, my sweet girl. You are perfect. You hear me? You are absolutely perfect." He placed her gently into the plush leather of the back seat, buckling her in himself, before closing the door. As Dominic walked around to the driver's side, he paused. He looked up at the towering brick facade of the Beaumont Hotel. The warm, golden light of the oak room spilled out from the second-story windows above. He could hear the faint, muffled sounds of laughter and jazz music. A chilling, predatory calmness washed over Dominic's features. He pulled a sleek black phone from his breast pocket and dialed a single number. It was answered on the first ring by his second-in-command, a ruthless enforcer named Luca. "Boss." Luca's rough voice came through the speaker. "Luca Dominic," said, his eyes still locked on the windows of the oak room. "I need the security footage from the Beaumont dining room for the last 3 hours. I want the names, addresses, and financial portfolios of every single person sitting at table 4. And I want a full dossier on a manager named Caldwell. Consider it done, boss. We moving on them tonight." Dominic looked back at the tinted window of the SUV where his crying, bleeding wife was hiding. "No," Dominic said, a dark, sadistic promise laced into the single syllable. "Tonight I take care of my wife. Tomorrow we take everything they have. I want them ruined before they even realize they're bleeding." He hung up the phone, the screen going black. The arrogant socialites of Chicago had played a game for their own amusement, picking on the softest, sweetest girl in the room. But they had broken the one rule of the underworld that everyone else knew to obey. You do not touch Dominic Costello's wife. And now hell was coming to collect. The Costello penthouse spanned the entire top floor of a monolithic glass tower overlooking Lake Michigan. It was a fortress of silent luxury, insulated from the noise of the city by bulletproof glass and private elevator access. When Dominic carried Clara through the double oak doors, the sprawling residence was completely quiet. He took her straight to the master bathroom, a massive expanse of black marble and brushed gold. Gently, as if handling priceless spun glass, he set her down on the plush velvet vanity stool. Clara was exhausted, her eyes red and swollen, her body still shivering intermittently from the adrenaline crash and the cold. Without a word, Dominic unbuttoned her ruined, wine-soaked uniform. He drew a warm bath, adding soothing oils, and helped her into the water. He knelt beside the massive soaking tub in his ruined dress shirt, taking a soft sponge and washing the dried blood and sticky wine from her skin. He handled her wounded fingers with agonizing care, meticulously cleaning the fine cuts on her hands before applying antiseptic and small bandages. "I feel so stupid," Clara whispered, her voice hoarse, staring down at the water. "I wanted to prove I could handle the real world, that I didn't need to hide behind you." Dominic paused, his dark eyes meeting hers. "You are the bravest woman I know, Clara. Walking into that room every day, knowing how those vipers operate, took more courage than most men in my organization possess. They didn't break you because you are weak. They targeted you because your light exposes their rot." He kissed her forehead, lingering there. "Rest now. You are safe. No one will ever speak to you that way again. I swear it on my life." After he tucked Clara into their sprawling, silk-sheeted bed and waited until her breathing evened out into a deep, exhausted sleep, Dominic's demeanor shifted. The tender, devoted husband vanished, replaced by the apex predator of Chicago. He walked down the long corridor to his private study, a dark, wood-paneled room that served as the nerve center for his empire. Luca was already there, standing by the massive mahogany desk. Beside him was Matteo Dominic's chief financial architect and cybersecurity ghost. Spread across the desk were 3 thick manila folders and a tablet. "Show me," Dominic commanded, pouring himself 2 fingers of neat scotch. Luca tapped the tablet. The high-definition security footage from the Beaumont's oak room flared to life. There was no audio, but Dominic didn't need it. His eyes tracked every micro-expression on the screen. He watched his beautiful, gentle wife approach table 4. He watched Jessica Kensington sneer. He watched Chloe Vanderpool and Brittany Haynes laugh. And then he watched Jessica deliberately kick the serving jack. He watched the tray fall. He watched the wine soak his wife. He watched Clara drop to her hands and knees to pick up the shattered glass, her head bowed in absolute humiliation, while the three women gloated above her. Dominic's grip on the heavy crystal glass tightened until his knuckles turned white. The silence in the study was deafening. Even Luca, a man who had seen bodies dismembered and buildings burned to the ground, shifted uncomfortably under the sheer, suffocating weight of his boss's murderous aura. With a sickening crack, the crystal glass shattered in Dominic's hand. Sharp shards sliced into his palm, but he didn't even flinch. The amber scotch dripped onto the carpet, mixing with a slow trickle of his own blood. "Boss," Luca said, quietly offering a dark towel. Dominic took it, wrapping his bleeding hand without taking his eyes off the frozen image of Jessica Kensington's laughing face on the screen. "Talk to me, Matteo," Dominic said, his voice a chilling, hollow rasp. "Who exactly are we looking at?" Matteo stepped forward, opening the first folder. "The ringleader is Jessica Kensington. Her father, Richard Kensington, owns Kensington Commercial Real Estate. They hold the leases for half the luxury retail spaces on the magnificent Mile. Net worth around $800 million. The blonde next to her is Chloe Vanderpool. Her family owns Vanderpool Pharmaceuticals, currently pushing a new line of aggressively priced antidepressants. The third is Brittany Haynes, trust fund baby minor internet celebrity, relies entirely on brand sponsorships." Dominic stared at the files. The traditional Mafia response would be to send Luca to drag them out of their beds, take them to a warehouse, and make them disappear. But death was too merciful for what they had done to Clara. Death was finite. Dominic wanted them to suffer a living hell. He wanted to strip away the only things they cared about: their money, their status, and their arrogance. "Matteo," Dominic murmured, turning to the financial wizard. "How deeply are we integrated into the Kensington supply chain? We control the Teamsters and the Steelworkers Union's boss. They're currently breaking ground on a $300 million high-rise project downtown. If the unions walk, the project dies, and Kensington defaults on their loans with Chase Bank." "Make them walk," Dominic ordered, "effective at midnight, and buy up Kensington's debt through our shell companies in the Caymans. When Chase Bank demands their money tomorrow morning, I want to be the one holding the paper. I want to foreclose on their entire empire before lunchtime." Matteo nodded rapidly, typing on his laptop. "Consider them bankrupt, boss." "What about the pharmaceutical company?" Dominic asked, his eyes shifting to Chloe Vanderpool's file. "Vanderpool Pharma is vulnerable," Matteo noted, adjusting his glasses. "They're waiting on FDA approval for their new drug, Lexaprozac. But my hackers found encrypted internal emails last week. The drug causes severe heart palpitations in 10% of trial subjects. The family paid off the researchers to bury the data so the stock wouldn't tank." A dark, terrifying smile curved Dominic's lips. "Leak it. Send the unredacted files to the FDA, the SEC, and the front page of the Wall Street Journal. I want federal agents raiding Vanderpool headquarters by 8 a.m. "And the influencer?" Luca asked, pointing to Brittany Haynes. "Destroy her digital footprint," Dominic commanded softly. "Wipe her servers. Have our bot farms mass report her accounts for terms of service violations until she's permanently banned from every platform. Then release that video of her doing cocaine in the VIP room at the underground club last month. Tag all of her corporate sponsors." Dominic turned away from the desk, looking out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the glittering skyline of Chicago. The city belonged to him, and these arrogant children thought they could walk into his kingdom and abuse his queen. "What about Caldwell?" Luca grunted. "The manager at the Beaumont." "Buy the Beaumont," Dominic said flatly. "Tonight. Offer the holding company whatever they want, triple market value if you have to. By tomorrow morning, I want to be the sole owner of that hotel." Fire Caldwell. Blacklist him from every hospitality agency in North America. Make sure the only job he can get is scraping gum off the sidewalks. It'll be done, boss, Luca said, gathering the files. One more thing, Dominic called out as the two men turned to leave. His eyes were cold, dead voids. When their lives collapse tomorrow, I don't want them guessing why. Send a car for the 3 girls tomorrow evening. Bring them to the warehouse. Monday morning in Chicago's financial district began like any other, but by 9 a.m. a localized apocalypse had descended upon 3 of the city's most prominent families. Jessica Kensington was lying on a massage table at a luxury spa in the Gold Coast when her phone began ringing incessantly. Annoyed, she ignored the first 5 calls, but when her father's private number flashed on the screen for the 6th time, she snatched it up. "What is it, Dad? I'm in the middle of a deep tissue. Get to the office." Richard Kensington roared through the speaker, his voice a hysterical cracking pitch she had never heard before. "Where the hell are you? We are going under." "What are you talking about?" Jessica snapped, sitting up and clutching the plush towel to her chest. The unions walked off the downtown project at midnight. Every single worker, Richard screamed, sounding like he was hyperventilating. Chase Bank panicked and sold our loans to a private equity firm, and the new firm just issued an immediate demand for repayment. "We don't have the liquidity, Jessica. They're seizing our assets. The accounts are frozen. We are ruined." Jessica dropped the phone. The color drained completely from her perfectly contoured face. Ruined? The Kensingtons didn't get ruined. They ruined other people. Across town, Chloe Vanderpool was sipping a matcha latte in the back of her chauffeur-driven Mercedes when the news broke. The radio, which had been playing soft classical music, cut to an emergency financial bulletin. "Breaking news this morning. Shares of Vanderpool Pharmaceuticals have plummeted a staggering 85% in pre-market trading. This comes after a massive data leak exposed internal documents suggesting the company knowingly buried severe health risks associated with their flagship antidepressant. Sources say the FBI and the FDA are currently raiding the Vanderpool corporate headquarters." Chloe choked on her latte, spilling the green liquid all over her white Gucci coat. Her phone vibrated violently. It was a text from her mother. "Don't come home. Feds are at the house. Dad is being arrested." Meanwhile, Brittany Haynes was filming a "Get Ready With Me" video for her 3 million followers. She smiled brightly at the camera, holding up a bottle of expensive serum. "So guys, you know I only use the absolute best." Her phone screen suddenly glitched. The live stream cut out. Confused, Brittany tapped the app, but a grey screen popped up. Account permanently suspended for severe policy violations. "What?" she muttered, her heart skipping a beat. She tried to log into her secondary accounts. Suspended. She checked her email. Her inbox was flooded. From Sephora PR, immediate termination of contract. From Revolve Clothing, contract voided. From PR manager, "Brittany, what the hell is this video you're dropped? Don't call me." Attached to the manager's email was a link. Brittany clicked it with trembling fingers. It was a crystal-clear video of her in a dingy nightclub bathroom, violently snorting lines of white powder off a vanity, cursing out her fans and calling her sponsors gullible idiots. The video had already been viewed 10 million times. In less than 3 hours, the 3 queens of Chicago high society had been utterly obliterated. Their fortunes were ash. Their reputations were poison. At the Beaumont Hotel, Mr. Caldwell arrived at 10 a.m., looking forward to berating the kitchen staff. But as he walked into the grand lobby, he was flanked by 4 men in dark suits. "Mr. Caldwell?" The tallest one asked, his voice deadpan. "Yes, who are you?" Caldwell asked, puffing out his chest. "We represent Costello Holdings. We purchased the Beaumont Hotel at 4 a.m. this morning. You are relieved of your duties effective immediately. Your severance is 0, as you are being terminated for gross negligence. Security will escort you off the premises. Do not return." Caldwell blustered his face, turning purple. "You can't do this. I am the general manager. I know the owner." "We are the owners," the suit replied coldly. "And you have 60 seconds to leave before you are thrown through the front doors." By late afternoon, the panic had settled into a cold, suffocating reality for Jessica, Chloe, and Brittany. They had congregated in Jessica's penthouse, which was currently in the process of being foreclosed on drinking straight vodka and sobbing hysterically. "It makes no sense," Jessica screamed, throwing her glass at the wall. It shattered much like the plates Clara had dropped. "How does a multi-million-dollar loan get called in on the same exact day Chloe's company is raided and Brittany is cancelled? This is a coordinated attack. Someone is doing this to us." Before Chloe could respond, the private elevator to the penthouse chimed. The doors slid open. 3 massive men in tailored dark suits stepped into the living room. They didn't look like police. They didn't look like corporate lawyers. They moved with the silent, terrifying grace of apex predators. At their helm was Luca, a fresh scar visible above his collar, his eyes devoid of any human empathy. Jessica Kensington, Chloe Vanderpool, Brittany Haynes. Luca said his voice, a low, gravelly rumble that made the hair on the back of their necks stand up. "Who the hell are you?" Jessica demanded, though her voice trembled wildly. "How did you get past security?" "Security works for us now," Luca replied simply. "You have an invitation. Our employer wishes to have a word with you." "We aren't going anywhere with you," Brittany shrieked, backing away. "I'm calling the police." Luca didn't even blink. "Your fathers are currently sitting in holding cells facing decades in federal prison. Their safety and your lives depend on your absolute compliance in the next 30 seconds. Walk to the elevator, or we will drag you by your hair. Choose." The raw, unfiltered violence in the man's eyes paralyzed them. The 3 women, stripped of their money, their power, and their false bravado, suddenly realized just how fragile they truly were. Shaking uncontrollably, clutching each other's hands, they walked into the elevator. The descent felt like a plunge into the underworld. They were loaded into the back of a black armored SUV, plunging into the dark, rain-slicked streets of Chicago. They had spent their entire lives treating people like garbage, confident in their untouchable status. They were about to find out that there were monsters in this city far more terrifying than mean girls, and they had just bullied the monster's wife. The SUV did not take them to a police station, nor did it pull up to a corporate law firm. Instead, it bypassed the glittering skyline of downtown Chicago, entirely navigating into the desolate industrial bowels of the Fulton Market District. The vehicle finally lurched to a halt inside a cavernous, abandoned meatpacking warehouse. The heavy metal doors groaned shut behind them, sealing them in absolute darkness, before a row of harsh industrial halogen lights flickered to life overhead. Luca opened the heavy doors of the SUV and dragged the women out by their designer coats. They stumbled onto the freezing, stained concrete floor. The air inside the warehouse was bitterly cold, smelling of rust, old blood, and damp earth. "Don't touch me!" Jessica shrieked, though her voice echoed pitifully in the massive space. She adjusted her disheveled cashmere sweater, trying desperately to project a bravery she did not feel. Chloe was openly weeping, her makeup running down her face in dark, ugly streaks, while Brittany was hyperventilating, clutching her dead cell phone as if it could somehow save her. "My father is friends with the mayor," Jessica screamed into the cavernous room, looking at the silent armed men standing in the shadows. "He golfs with the governor. Whoever you people are, you have made a massive mistake. We will sue you into oblivion." Do you know who I am? I know exactly who you are, Jessica. The voice came from the far end of the warehouse. It was deep calm and laced with an icy authority that instantly silenced her screaming. Out of the shadows stepped Dominic Costello. He had shed his suit jacket, wearing only a black tailored dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, exposing the dark, intricate tattoos wrapping around his forearms. He walked with the slow, deliberate pacing of a tiger cornering wounded prey. The armed men in the room instantly straightened their eyes, fixed respectfully on the floor. Jessica, Chloe, and Brittany stared at him, paralyzed. They ran in circles of old money and corporate elitism, but even they recognized raw, unfiltered power when they saw it. The man standing before them didn't just have money. He was the kind of man who made billionaires check beneath their beds. "I know you," Chloe whispered, her eyes widening in absolute terror. "I've seen you at the charity galas. You're Dominic Costello. You own half the shipping ports in the Midwest." And as of this morning, Dominic said, stopping 10 feet away from them, his hands casually slipped into his pockets, "I own your father's pharmaceutical company, Chloe. I own Jessica's real estate empire, and I own the digital media agency that completely scrubbed Brittany from the internet." The girls gasped, the horrifying reality finally sinking in. This wasn't a coordinated string of bad luck. This was an execution. "Why?" Jessica choked out her arrogance, finally cracking, replaced by genuine trembling fear. "We don't even know you. We have no business with Costello Holdings. If this is a shakedown, take the money. Just leave our families alone." Dominic let out a low, dark chuckle that sent a shiver down their spines. "Money. Do you honestly think I care about your pathetic little trust funds? I burn more cash in a week than your fathers generate in a decade." "No, Jessica. This isn't about business. This is about a severe lapse in your manners." "Manners?" Brittany sobbed, falling to her knees. "What are you talking about?" "You three have spent your entire privileged lives stepping on people." Dominic stated, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "You look at the working class as if they are insects beneath your expensive shoes. You mock, you belittle, and you destroy for your own shallow amusement. But yesterday evening at the Beaumont Hotel, you made a fatal miscalculation. You decided to play your vicious little games with a waitress." The three women froze. The memory of the previous night flashed through their minds, the dropped tray, the spilled wine, the cruel jokes. The waitress," Jessica stammered, her mind struggling to process the information. "You bankrupted 3 multi-million-dollar families over a fat, clumsy waitress." The temperature in the warehouse seemed to drop 20 degrees. Luca took a step forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his weapon, but Dominic raised a single finger, stopping him. Dominic's eyes were pitch black, devoid of all mercy. "That waitress," Dominic said softly, every syllable dripping with malice, "is my wife." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of 3 lives spontaneously combusting. Chloe let out a strangled gasp, covering her mouth with both hands. Brittany simply collapsed onto her side, weeping hysterically into the dirty concrete. Jessica shook her head, wildly denial, overriding her survival instincts. No, that's impossible. Costello's wife, she was pouring our water. She was cleaning up our broken plates. She's a nobody. She is the Queen of Chicago. A new feminine voice echoed through the warehouse. Footsteps approached from the shadows behind Dominic. The armed guards parted respectfully. Clara stepped into the light. The 3 socialites gasped, their jaws practically hitting the floor. The woman standing beside Dominic Costello was unrecognizable from the terrified, shrinking girl in the starchy black uniform from the night before. Clara was wearing a breathtaking, custom-tailored scarlet Alexander McQueen pantsuit that hugged her curves flawlessly. Her chestnut hair fell in cascading, perfect waves over her shoulders. Around her neck sat a staggering diamond choker, matching the blinding 5-carat ring on her finger. But the most striking change was her posture. She stood tall, her shoulders back, her sweet brown eyes, now glowing with a newfound, quiet strength. Dominic looked down at her, the murderous intent in his eyes, melting away, replaced instantly by absolute reverent devotion. He gently took her hand, kissing her knuckles before turning back to the trembling women on the floor. "Clara," Jessica whispered the name, tasting like ash in her mouth. "Hello, Jessica," Clara said calmly. Her voice didn't shake. The agonizing fear that used to grip her chest whenever these women were near was completely gone. Looking at them now, shivering, ruined, and kneeling in the dirt, she realized they weren't powerful at all. They were just bullies hiding behind their daddies' wallets, and those wallets were currently empty. "You didn't know," Clara continued, stepping slightly ahead of Dominic. "I never wanted you to know. I just wanted an honest job. I wanted to work hard, and I wanted to be treated like a human being. But you couldn't allow that, could you? You saw someone you thought was weak, and you tried to break her for sport." "Clara, please," Chloe begged, crawling forward on her knees, her designer coat dragging in the grime. "We were joking. It was just a stupid, awful joke. We're sorry. We are so sorry. Please tell him to give our families back. My dad is going to prison. Your father is going to prison because he poisoned people and hid the data." "Chloe," Clara said firmly. "Dominic just made sure the truth saw the light of day." "You set us up." Jessica snapped a flash of her old venom, returning as she pointed a manicured, trembling finger at Clara. "You entrapped us. You played the pathetic victim, just waiting for an excuse to have your mobster husband ruin us." Before Jessica could draw another breath, Dominic moved. He was a blur of calculated violence. In a fraction of a second, Dominic crossed the space, his large hand wrapping around Jessica's throat. He hoisted her off her feet, her toes dangling inches above the concrete floor. Jessica choked her hands, clawing desperately at Dominic's iron grip, her eyes bulging with pure, unadulterated terror. "Dom!" Clara gasped. "She has not learned her lesson, amore mio," Dominic growled, not looking away from Jessica's purple-turning face. "I should cut out her tongue. I should feed her to the harbor." "Put her down, Dominic," Clara said, her voice ringing out with clear, steady authority. It wasn't a plea. It was a command. Slowly, Dominic released his grip. Jessica crumpled to the concrete, gasping frantically for air, coughing and clutching her bruised throat. Clara walked over, standing directly above the woman who had made her life a living hell. She looked down at Jessica, not with hatred, but with a cold, absolute pity. "I don't want you dead," Clara said softly, "but I do want you to understand exactly how it feels to be nothing." Clara turned to Luca, giving him a subtle nod. Luca walked into the shadows and returned a moment later, wheeling a heavy silver serving jack. On top of it sat a massive silver tray, a stack of pristine porcelain Beaumont Hotel dinner plates, and an uncorked bottle of $1,000 vintage Merlot. He wheeled the cart directly in front of the 3 kneeling women and stepped back. Jessica, still gasping for air, looked up at the cart, her eyes widening in horror. She knew exactly what was happening. It was a flawless recreation of the nightmare she had orchestrated the night before. Clara stepped forward. She didn't hesitate. With a swift, deliberate motion, she placed her hand under the heavy silver tray and flipped it. Crash! The sound echoed violently through the warehouse. The porcelain plates shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces across the filthy concrete. The vintage Merlot splashed down, soaking into the hem of Jessica's beige cashmere skirt and splattering across Chloe and Brittany's expensive boots. The dark red liquid pooled around their knees, mixing with the dirt. "Clean it up," Clara ordered. The words hung in the freezing air, heavy and absolute. "What?" Brittany sobbed, looking at the sharp, jagged glass littering the floor. We don't have brooms. We don't have gloves." "Neither did my wife," Dominic stated, his voice a lethal rumble that vibrated in their chests. "You watched her bleed. You laughed while she picked up the pieces you broke. Now it's your turn. If a single sliver of glass is left on this floor in 10 minutes, none of you will ever leave this building." Jessica looked at the shattered glass, then up at Clara's impassive face. The heiress, who had never done a day of physical labor in her life, who had treated the working class like dirt beneath her feet, slowly lowered her trembling hands to the concrete. Weeping loudly, Chloe and Brittany followed suit. For the next 10 minutes, the only sound in the cavernous warehouse was the frantic, pathetic sobbing of the 3 women and the sickening scrape of broken porcelain being scooped up by bare hands. The jagged edges sliced into their perfectly manicured fingers. Blood mixed with the spilled wine, staining their skin and ruining their clothes. They piled the broken shards onto the dented silver tray, shivering in the freezing air, utterly and entirely broken. Clara watched them. A week ago, the sight of their blood might have made her sick, but standing beside Dominic, feeling the weight of the diamond on her finger, and the absolute certainty of his protection, she felt nothing but a profound sense of closure. The ghosts of her insecurity were being swept up off the floor, along with the broken glass. When the last shard was placed on the tray, Jessica sat back on her heels. Her hands were bleeding, her expensive outfit was ruined with dirt and wine, and her face was a swollen, tear-stained mess. She looked up at Clara thoroughly and utterly defeated. Are we done?" Jessica whispered, her voice broken. "Almost," Dominic said. He stepped forward, wrapping a protective arm around Clara's waist, pulling her flush against his side. "You have 24 hours to pack whatever you can fit into a single suitcase. You will leave Chicago. You will never contact your former associates. You will never attempt to reclaim your assets. And if I ever hear that you have spoken my wife's name aloud, I will find you. And I will not be nearly this generous a second time." He looked down at them, his dark eyes void of mercy. "Do you understand?" "Yes." The 3 women sobbed in unison, keeping their heads bowed to the concrete. "Yes, we understand." "Good," Dominic said softly. He turned to Luca. "Drive them to the city limits. Drop them on the highway. Let them walk the rest of the way." Dominic turned back to Clara, the terrifying Mafia Don, vanishing instantly, replaced by the loving, devoted husband. "Are you ready to go home, amore mio?" Clara looked at the trembling women one last time. She didn't feel small anymore. She didn't feel like a target. She felt like Clara Costello. "Yes." She smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Take me home." 3 months later, the Beaumont Hotel reopened under new management. The grand opening was the social event of the season, but the elite clientele quickly noticed some massive changes. The draconian dress codes for the staff were gone, replaced by comfortable, elegant uniforms. The kitchen staff received full benefits and double the industry standard in pay. And Mr. Caldwell had been replaced by a fiercely protective general manager who tolerated absolutely zero abuse from the guests. On opening night, Clara stood on the second-floor balcony overlooking the Oak Room. She wore a stunning emerald green evening gown that hugged her curves, her diamond ring sparkling under the 1920s crystal chandeliers. She wasn't holding a tray, and she wasn't hiding in the shadows. She was surveying her kingdom. Dominic stepped up behind her, wrapping his strong arms around her waist and pressing a soft kiss to her neck. "They love the new menu," he murmured, looking down at the packed dining room. "You did incredible work, boss." Clara smiled, leaning back into the solid warmth of his chest. "I had a good investor." "You have a husband who would burn the world down for you," Dominic corrected gently. "Do you miss it? Waiting tables." Clara looked down at table 4. It was currently occupied by a lovely older couple celebrating their anniversary. She thought about Jessica, Chloe, and Brittany, who were currently working minimum-wage jobs in a rundown diner in Nebraska, entirely cut off from the wealth they had weaponized. "No," Clara said softly, turning in Dominic's arms and looping her arms around his neck. She looked up into his dark, devoted eyes. "I think I finally know exactly where I belong." Dominic smiled, capturing her lips in a deep, passionate kiss. In the glittering heart of Chicago, the ruthless Don had finally found his peace, and the invisible waitress had finally claimed her crown. Conclusion. Did these mean girls get exactly what they deserved, or was Dominic's revenge too brutal? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story of instant karma, Mafia, romance and a sweet girl finally claiming her power, please hit that like button. Don't forget to share this video with your friends who love a good revenge story, and subscribe to the channel for more dramatic, thrilling tales of love and justice. Ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. See you in the next story.